a very quick review of where we are. Actually, it's a new concept today, so it doesn't really matter. So the quick review is like this. Perek Aleph, we were trying to understand the difference between a Beinani, a Rasha, and a Tzaddik. That's what we did in Perek Aleph. We didn't get an explanation yet. We kind of know the story a little bit. Then we were introduced in Perek Aleph to the animal soul. And we say this is the soul that wants to survive. It only thinks about yourself. In Perek Bet, we explain that each Jew also has a godly soul. And that godly soul is a seed from God. It looks different, just like a body has different qualities. That's what we discussed in Perek Bet. Now we're going to continue in Perek Gimel. So Perek Gimel, you can find on page 10. And Perek Gimel, we're going to start going, just by the way, just to put a blueprint of where we're going over here. Before we can start working on ourselves, being a good Jew, knowing what a Jew is supposed to do, before we can even start to see all the type of problems that we do have within ourselves, before that he's going to describe the systems we're going to work with. This is just a blueprint of the system. He's going to describe the way the system is, and then later on in Tanya, we're going to start to discuss diagnostics. If the system doesn't work over here well, you don't have... See, on Perek Bet we just discussed how a godly soul should be. And each one of us looks at himself, and he says to himself, I don't work according to the godly soul, according to my godly soul. I work according to my animal soul. That's the diagnostic is going to get later on. But first of all, you think you have a problem with the carburetor. Over here, you're going to find out it's not even a problem with the carburetor, the problem is somewhere else. So that's why we have a description right now of how the soul works. What's the power of the soul, what's going on, which one affects what affects whom. And after we finish that, he's going to start with diagnostics. What to do if we have a problem, and how to solve those problems. So Perek Gimel is a continuation of the description of the machine. But in Perek Gimel, we're already going to get some clues about how things can go wrong. So let's start. The start of Perek Gimel is Kabbalistic. It sounds Kabbalistic. I'm going to explain though. I'm not going to delve too deep, because this is not the scope. But if you have a question, I will address it though. So if you do have a question, I will address it. But we're going to try to go through the Kabbalistic idea pretty quickly. Perek Gimel, chapter Gimel. והנה, that Rebbe starts, כל בחינת ומדרגה משלוש אלו. So we discussed, we're still continuing to discuss the godly soul. We're going to discuss the animal soul later on, coming up later on. Just remember that over here, don't ask questions from the animal soul. You can ask questions about the godly soul. We're discussing the structure of the godly soul. So the godly soul, as we described before, consists of 5 levels. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. But we're going to describe the Neshama, the Nefesh, which consists of 3, of Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. This is the 3 levels of the soul. By the way, the animal soul also has it. As we discussed, we have both of them. They all have all. So this soul, this godly soul, consists of Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. We're going to discuss the difference between them much later on. But it's 3 levels of the soul. We're going to call them Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. And that Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, כלולה מ10 בחינות. It has 10 attributes. So if you go to Kabbalah, you know that the Kabbalah has the 10 spheres, the 10 attributes. Today we're going to cover the spheres a little bit. Keneged, what's this 10 attributes that the soul has? Why does the soul have 10 attributes? It comes me'eser keneged eser sfirot elionot. This is corresponding to the 10 ways God relates with the physical world. Or spiritual world. There's 10 ways that how God relates to the world, to our worlds, spiritual or physical. So because God relates to the world with 10 ways, we are made in the image of God, so the soul consists of those 10 attributes. It also has the 10 attributes that God relates to the world with. I'll tell you, in the beginning it's a little bit Kabbalah, but I'll explain. שנשתלשלו מהם, that came from them. And now we're going to start getting the definitions. These 10 attributes, by the way, you can take it from many places in Kabbalah, many places in Hasidus. If you understand this, you'll be able to understand a lot of other places. So these 10 spheres, we're going to divide into two main sections. שהן נחלקות לשתיים. So these 10 spheres, we're going to divide into two parts. שהן שלוש imot. They are the three mothers, which we're going to discuss soon what they are. ושבע כפולות, and 7 doubles, 7 pairs. There's the 3 mothers and 7 offsprings, as we're going to see soon. The mothers give birth to the offsprings. Perush, so let's try to work it out. Chochma, Bina, Vedat, we have Chabad, first of all. That's the acronym of Chabad. Chochma, Bina, and Dat. I am not going to give you a definition of Chochma, Bina, and Dat. I'm not going to give you any translation of Chochma, Bina, Vedat, because the translation has got nothing to do. The English translation has got nothing to do with the definition of Chochma, Bina, and Dat. We're going to call them Chochma, Bina, and Dat. We're going to use those words. And I'm going to explain what they are. And so we have the 3 mothers, Chochma, Bina, and Dat. And then we have, you remember I said God has a relates to the world. So God relates to the world. How? Part of it is creating it. And that's why it's called, the other ones are called Shivat Yemei Binyan. The 7 days of God creating the world. And what are they? Chesed Gvura. They are Chesed and Gvura and Tiferet. Again, I'm not going to give you a definition in English. I'm not going to translate it into English because we're going to explain what they are. Chulu. He doesn't even say the other ones, what they are, because it's not important. They are derivatives. All the other ones are Chesed and Gvura. Tiferet is a combination of Chesed and Gvura. Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, as we're going to learn later on, are minor Chesed and Gvura. And we're going to discuss them later on, what they are. וכך, בנפש האדם שנחלקת לשתיים. So now we're going to have, we, as human beings, we divide into 2 creatures. What are the 2 creatures? 2 things. Our soul, sechel umidot, intellect and emotions. Intellect and emotions. So we are made out of 2 aspects. One of it is intellect, the other one is emotions. And the intellect gives birth to the emotions, as we're going to talk about soon. Hasechel kolel, in the intellect, we have 3 mothers, 3 levels. Chochma, Bina, Vedat. The 3 levels are Chochma, Bina, Vedat, which we're going to discuss soon what they are. Vehamidot. And what are you talking about? Emotions. Remember, we're talking about godly soul. So the godly soul is not afraid of a lion. It's not afraid of lack of money. It's not afraid of being hungry. The godly soul loves God and has awe of God. 2 attributes of the godly soul. We're talking about the godly soul over here in this chapter. That's it. It has nothing else. Love and awe. Okay. וחב"ד נקראו, and the level of intellect, Chabad, Chochma Bina Adat, they are called Amot, they're called mothers. Umakor Lamidot, they are the source of the emotions. Ki Hamidot hen toldot Chabad, because the emotions are the offsprings of Chabad. Let's start to have some explanations of here. So it goes like this. Do you like money? Is there anybody of you who doesn't like money? Raise your hand. Nobody's. Yeah, nobody's going to raise his hand. Yeah, exactly. Everybody likes money. How come a 5-year-old doesn't like money?
Doesn't understand the concept.
Explain again. Say it again.
Doesn't understand the concept of money.
But it's love. What does emotions have to do with understanding?
He doesn't understand what he can do with it.
Yeah, but it's emotions. Why are you connecting emotions and understanding? Emotions is emotion. Does he love his mother? Yeah. Does he love chocolate? Yeah. How come he doesn't love his money?
He doesn't need it. He loves his mother because he needs his mother. He loves chocolate because he thinks he needs chocolate.
So we're going to learn, very good, there actually is a connection between intellect and emotions. And we're going to discuss not every emotion, but if a child, in order to love money, he needs to understand what money is. Without intellect, he's not going to love money. And even then, the more he will understand the value of money, the more he will love it. If he understands the value of money a little bit, he loves money a little bit. If he understands the value of money a lot, he will love money a lot. This is why we say the intellect gives birth to the emotions. Let's start talk about us. Chocolate we love. Everybody naturally loves chocolate. A good steak we love. Ice cream we love. We have an emotional. We all put on tefillin every day. How come we don't? When there's a good steak waiting for you and you can smell it, or the coffee in the morning is waiting for me, I can smell the coffee, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get the coffee. I'm all excited, I'm all giddy. I'm going to get a cup of coffee. I'm all excited. How come I'm not giddy when it comes to the tefillin? I'm not giddy. I put it on, I do what God says, but I'm not giddy. I'm not experience nirvana every time I put on giddy. So the answer is simple. I don't understand tefillin. The more you will understand tefillin, the more the emotions of putting the tefillin will grow. The less you understand tefillin, the same thing, let's leave tefillin by the side, because tefillin is not God yet. It might turn into God later on, but so far we don't know the relationship. We don't get excited about God. We get excited about going on a trip. How old am I? I'm 57, 58 now, 57 years old. You tell me tomorrow, Rabbi, we're going to Disneyland tomorrow? Yeah? And trust me, what am I going to do in Disneyland? I don't go on the rides, I don't do nothing. I get excited. Tell me to go to Disneyland tomorrow, a grown man like me, I get excited. So what are you getting excited for? But you tell me tomorrow you're going to learn a daf of Gemara? Okay, so I'm going to learn a daf of Gemara tomorrow. Big deal. There's no excitement there. Again, why? I don't understand. If I understand what a daf of Gemara is, maybe I get excited. In other words, I don't have an understanding enough in order for the emotions to come into being. They're not born. My emotions are not born. Maybe it's lack of understanding, or maybe it's something else we'll see later on. Okay, so let's start from the beginning now, and we're going to work out how intellect actually affects the emotion. So we're in page number 10, all the way in the bottom, the last line, 3 words from the bottom. last three words on the page. Ubi'ur ha'inyan. And the explanation of this is, Ki hine, everything starts, Hasechel shebenefesh hamaskelet, starts in the soul of the intellect, let's call it. Shehu hamaskil kol davar, the power that understands anything. What do we call this power? Nikra b'shem chokhmah. So the first power is called chokhmah, and in Hebrew the word chokhmah, you can change the letters, it means koach ma. Koach means power, ma is power that we don't understand. Let's have a beginning of the discussion right now. So there's an understanding. Let's take a scientist. Why? A scientist works on a problem his entire life. Sometimes many hours, many days, many years sometimes. How come all of a sudden, one day he wakes up and he says, I got it. How come he didn't get yesterday? Where was it? Where was the information yesterday before the person say, I got it? Or you don't have to go even to a scientist. Take any one of us. Things we understood. You know, somebody told you something and you used to say the words, and all of a sudden you become an adult, says, all of a sudden, he says, oh, now I understand what the guy is talking about. What do you mean? And where was the understanding until now? It's a power that we don't know where it is. We don't know where it is. We don't know why it came. Why yesterday the idea fell into your head, and 2 days ago it didn't. It's a power not only we don't understand, it is like science. You know how science starts discussing the Big Bang 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 5 milliseconds after that, but it doesn't discuss before it? The reason why it doesn't discuss before it, because it says we don't have the tools for it. Also, when it comes to the soul, we don't have the tools to understand where the information comes from. When does the ideas, the world of ideas, where does it come from? We don't understand that. We do understand it after the point that we understand. Our starting point is going to start at the point of understanding. I understood it. If you want a definition of Chokhmah, Disney has a great definition. All we think about it, this one they got right. You remember in the cartoons when somebody has an idea, what happens? A light bulb go over here, and he says, now it shines. Now I can see. Now I understand. That's what Chokhmah is. Chokhmah is the spark. The spark comes and the whole room becomes lit. So let's understand what's going on over here. A person goes around in the world or goes around in the room and he has no understanding. What does it mean he has no understanding? In this room that he's in, there's a lot of furniture. There's lots and lots of furniture. And if he will see the furniture, he will know if it's a bathroom or a bedroom or a kitchen, but he cannot, he's blind. It's completely dark, and he doesn't see anything. He's not able to see. And he's trying to figure out, where am I? And all of a sudden, there's lightning outside. And for a split second, the entire room is lit. He sees it, but it's gone a second later. In other words, it happens constantly in our lives, if you notice. Yeah. I understand, and you ask the guy, what did you understand? He says, hold on. He says, what do you mean, hold on? Didn't you just claim you understood? So why now you're saying, I don't know? It's all disappeared because the Chokhmah comes in as a lightning and it immediately disappears. And you don't know. You want now you want to really understand, you know what you need to do? You need to fake memorize what you saw. In other words, you're not going to see it again. You only saw it once. lightning only will come once. Now you have to go through the room in your mind. It says, what did I see? I saw a cabinet over there, and I saw this over there, and I saw the walls went this high, and this went over there. And now you're trying to recreate in your mind what you saw. You're trying to recreate in your mind exactly the things that you saw. In other words, you're trying to take the room that you kind of disappeared from your memory, and you're trying to grow it this way, and you're trying to grow it this way, and you're trying to give it depth to see the whole room. Once you see the whole room, you'll be able to recreate this whole room in your mind. Then you say, now I understand. This process of recreation, is called Bina. Bina is the process of recreation. Now we actually learned this before. Where did we learn this before? If you remember, we discussed, but in Chabad, in Chokhmah, Bina, in that level, we say they are the mothers. They are the one who's going to give the offsprings their life. They're going to create the offsprings. So Chokhmah and Bina, in Chokhmah, Bina and that, we also have within that structure a father and a mother. The father happens to be Chokhmah, and the mother happens to be Bina. And it works exactly like we explained before, how the souls descended down through the worlds. So let me explain what I'm saying. You remember we said that each and every one of us, our soul is a seed of God. It starts from the seed. Right? You remember saying that? Chokhmah is the seed. Bina is the mother who takes the seed. You remember? Every world is the mother, it's a pregnancy. She takes the seed and she makes it grow. All the information is in the first understanding. All Bina does, Bina is nothing. Bina doesn't do anything on its own. All it does is it takes the seed and it expands it, it grows it until it understands, until the baby is formed. Let's call it this way. Now, let's go back to the world of Kabbalah. You're going to like this. And this works when every time you work in Kabbalah from now on, you'll be able to apply it. Everybody knows God's name. Yud, and then Hey, and then Vav, and the Hey. God comes down into this world through this system every time. So every world, Yud K, Vav K, is going to come down through the world of Atzilut, to the world of Bria, to the world of Yetzirah, and the world of Asiya, is going to come Yud K, Vav K. What does it mean? It's going to start with Yud. What's Yud? Yud is the smallest letter. It's a point. It represents the world. The letter Yud represents the seed of God. This is where, in one point, God is consecrated all of himself into the Yud. This is what Yud is. And that's why it looks like a Yud. The Yud is all the genetics of God are right over there. That's where in the soul is. That's where the Yud is. What's the Hey? The Hey is the mother, it's the Bina. And look what the Hey does. The Hey takes the seed, the information, and she makes it grow. And she's going to make it grow in 3 directions. She's going to make it grow lengthwise, widthwise, and depth. The small little one is going to be depth, which we're going to explain later on also. So the Yud and Hey of God, the Yud and the Hey, is actually a representative of Chokhmah and Bina, of a person. So it says, you want to love God? Only one way. First of all, you want to love God. You want to have any emotions towards God. We said, you want to have emotions towards money? You better know what money is. You want to have an emotion towards God? It says, you first need to understand what God is. Just the understanding that will come to you, I saw godliness, one time will mean nothing. Because you have to take that experience, and now you will have to make it grow. You will have to make it It has to go through a pregnancy. You have to develop that seed. The mother has to take that seed and to develop it and to lengthen it and to give it a depth until you see the baby. Okay, so this is where we are right now. Let's read it inside. We are on page 12, all the way on top. Let's read a little bit again. והנה השכל שבנפש המשכלת שהוא משכיל כל דבר נקרא בשם חוכמה כוח מה. This is what חוכמה is, כוח מה. וכשמוציא כוחו אל הפועל, and when a person starts thinking, developing that idea that dropped in his mind, להבין דבר, to understand something, לאשורו, well, ולעמקו, and to the depth, מתוך איזה דבר חוכמה המושכל בשכלו, through the intellect, through the power of חוכמה that he understood, that process is called bina. That process is called bina. So חוכמה and bina are the two parents of the emotions that we're going to come later on. והן הם, and then the חוכמה and bina, הראב ואם, they are the mother and the father, המלידות אהבת השם ויראתו, they give birth to the love of God and the awe of God. And being scared of God. We're not going to discuss this right now, again, because it's going to be discussed later on. What's the difference between ir'a and pachad? Not for us for right now. And then he explains how is the process. כי השכל שבנפש המשכלת, because the intellect, the power of intellect that is in the thinking soul, כשמתבונן ומעמיק מאוד בגדולת השם, when a person is going deep into the greatness of God, he understands the greatness of God. What part of the greatness of God? Again, we're going to learn Kabbalah. איך הוא ממלא כל עלמין, how God fills the world, וסובב כל עלמין, and how God surrounds the world. We're not going to explain this Kabbalistic idea right now, but it's two opposite things that God is able to do at the same time. Just have it in that mind. וכולי קמא כלא חשיב, and the entire world over here, the entire existence of the world is meaningless, is nothing compared to godliness. When a person understands the greatness of God, let's call it, both in his infinity and in its infinite state, when he understands that, then what's going to happen? And he thinks about it, not just understand, thinks about it, as Bina grew it up, נולדה ונתעוררה מידת יראת הרוממות במוחו. He's going to see the greatness of God. He's going to have an awe of God in his brain. ומחשבתו, and in his thinking. לירא ולהתבושש מגדולתו יתברך. He's going to have awe, and he's going to be ashamed from the greatness of God. שאין לו סוף ותכלית, that the greatness of God has no end. And then he's going to also have פחד השם בליבו. He's also going to have not only awe, he's going to have fear, physical fear. We look at it as a negative thing. It's a positive thing because we're talking about fear of God over here. How is it positive? We'll have to discuss, by the way, later on. Not every fear of God is positive. Not every fear of God. Some fear of God is toxic. It's just like some relationships, the relationship we have with God, we have to be very careful. Some people have a toxic relationship with God. God is an abuser in the relationship. What do I mean? God is they're afraid that God's going to send them to hell. Yeah? They don't look at God as a father. It's not the same awe that a person will have from a tzaddik, for example, from Rabbi Akiva. See, if King David is here, I'm going to behave well. I'm not going to behave well because I'm afraid King David is going to slap me. I have awe of him. Yeah, it's King David. If Rabbi Akiva is here, I'm not going to do stupid stuff. Not because I'm afraid Rabbi Akiva is going to shout at me. That's a toxic relationship. That's an abusive relationship. If I'm afraid that Rabbi Akiva is going to shout at me and abuse me and hit me and punish me, what kind of relationship is that? That's a talking. We're not talking about a toxic relationship with God. We're talking about a proper relationship with God. All means I respect him. I'm embarrassed to act not nicely next to him. That's what all means. It not mean I'm afraid he's going to hit me. I'm afraid he's going to send me to hell. If a person is afraid that God is going to send me to hell, he's got an abusive relationship with God. If a person behaves well next to his father because he's afraid his father is going to hit him, that's an abusive relationship he had with his father. A person should have a relationship with his father. I'm going to do it because I want to make you happy. I'm going to do it because I respect you. I'm not doing it because I'm afraid you're going to punish me. What kind of relationship is that?
I'm going to do it because I don't want to disappoint you.
I'm not going to disappoint you. Very good. Yeah? So we'll have to discuss, because a lot of people, the relationship with God is an abusive relationship. We're not talking about abusive relationships over here. We're talking about proper relationships, yes.
I think this is the mechanism of love.
Very good. Very good. I agree with you. I agree. And we're going to see later on how much it is so. Very good. And not only that, the more you understand the greatness of God, the more you see who God is, not only you're going to have awe of his greatness, you're going to start having love towards him. You'll be attracted to him. In other words, the more you understand God, the more awe of God and love of God you will have. These two things, love and awe of God, we're going to call them Chesed and Gvura. They have a name. They're called Chesed and Gvura. That's what they're called. By the way, when we use the word Chesed, in English it translates to kindness, and Gvura translates to might. Don't use these words. Erase them from your mind. If you want a definition of Chesed and Gvura, Chesed means you get it. It's a magnet. Chesed and Gvura, always think about it. It's always like this. It's always a magnet. What does it mean? Chesed attracts, Gvura repels. That's what it is. That's Chesed and Gvura.
Can you give an example?
Yes.
Because, what we say, I help
Ye-
somebody,
yes.
I call it an act of chesed.
Yes. Yeah. See, I'll give you an example. Chesed means you want to give. You're giving to everything. Gvura means the act of not giving. By the way, there is no such thing as not giving in Judaism. Gvura is chesed. Okay, let's explain this. This has to be explained. In mathematics, there's no such thing as subtracting or division. There's only addition. Not even multiplication doesn't exist. There's only addition. Now, what do I mean? You are going on a line. You can either go 5 steps to the left or 5 steps to the right. But you're always adding. We call subtraction when you go the opposite way. That's what subtraction is. But subtraction is a direction. It is not really subtracting. Let me explain.
Adding it in a negative way.
You're adding it in the opposite direction. So let me explain what I'm saying. Chesed and Gvura both give. Both Chesed and Gvura give. They give differently. And let me explain. Chesed means you give everything. You give infinitely. You give to everybody. Gvura, you realize, for example, let's take a professor. A professor who is chesed wants to reveal, he just understood something very, very deep. He wants to reveal to the entire world what he understood. So how is he going to reveal to the entire world after understood? He calls a conference and he gives a lecture for 6 hours. And then what happened after the 6 hours? Millions of people watched the lecture that he just gave. And out of this million people, 2 people understood. Why? Because he gave everything he had. He shined to everybody. Everybody heard the message. but nobody receives. What is Gvura? Gvura is also giving. But how is Gvura giving? In Gvura, what is the professor going to do? He's going to understand that if he's going to give the light the way it is right now in his brain to the people, nobody will be able to accept it. It's going to be too much for them. So what does he do? He dims the light, and he dims the light, and he gives another analogy, and another analogy, and he dumbs it down, and he dumbs it down, and he hides it. He makes boundaries and boundaries and boundaries and boundaries. But why is he putting all these boundaries for? In order to reveal it to the regular people. So in other words, we look at Gevura as hiding the light, not giving. The opposite. Gevura is a process of giving even much more than chesed. It just works differently. So again, chesed, if you think about the word chesed, means to get attraction, or love. What is love? I love money. You've seen Scrooge McDuck? He dives into the pool of the coins. You remember that? Scrooge, he is too young. Yeah, he doesn't know who Scrooge McDuck is. He dives into the pool full of coins because he wants to be next to his money. He loves money. Yeah, that's what chesed is. Yeah, you love it. You want to. It attracts you.
Bitcoins, but they are not in the pool.
So yeah, if they were, you would dive into. Yeah, so that's the idea. Okay. So the Chochmah and Bina awakens the Chesed and Gvura. They give birth to Chesed and Gvura. Okay, that's where we are. We are on the line starting at about 10 lines from the top, on page 14. Line starting, Legdulat Ein Sof Baruch Hu, to the greatness of God. And a person gets to a level of his, because of his understanding and bina of God, he can get to a level, klota nefesh, that his soul wants to attach himself to God to such an extent, like this. That's what the level that a person should get to God. Can't think about anything else besides him. Kedechtiv, how do we know this? This is King David says, Nichsefa vegam kalta nafshi. In Tehillim, King David says, my soul yearns for godliness. Why is his soul yearn for godliness? Because he understands the greatness of God. And he contemplated it. And he thought about it. Vechtiv, and it's written, Tzama nafshi le'elokim. It says, my soul is thirsty for God. It's yearning for God. Again, why? Because he understands godliness. Over here comes not a nice message for us. Why is it not so nice? Because over here it looks like, so far, that if you don't have the intellect to understand God, you will never be able to get to the levels King David and King Solomon have ever achieved. Do you know why King David yearns to God? Because he understands God and he contemplates it. And even if we'll understand something, it's not going to be on the level of King David. So how are we going to able to get to these levels? We'll talk about later on. But just to know, it looks from right now that you need to get to the levels of really understanding godliness. Which means, what do you mean? Me? Really understand godliness? Yes. Otherwise you won't get to these levels. Vatzimaon hu miyesodo esh. And he says the thirst to godliness comes from the element of fire, like we discussed before. Shebanefesh haelokit, that is in the godly soul. וכמו שכתוב הטבעיים, וכן הוא בעץ חיים, this is also written in a Kabbalistic book, שיסוד האש הוא בלב, that the spirit of fire is in the heart, as we discussed about the animal soul, if you remember. ומקור המים והלחות מהמוח, and the attribute of wetness, or water, is in the brain. וכמו שכתוב בעץ חיים שער נון, שהיא בחינת חוכמה שנקראת מים. This is why חוכמה is called water, because it comes down just like water. It has the attribute to always comes down. שבנפש האלוקית. ושאר המידות כולן, and all the other attributes, like chesed and gvura. See, By the way, so Chesed and Gvura, we discovered they're actually the same thing. They're both the power of revelation. They reveal in a different manner. Chesed reveals by shining light, infinite light. Those creatures who are infinite can grasp it. Those creatures who are not infinite cannot grasp it. That's what Chesed. Gvura is also shining light, but it's shining light to limited beings. So the light had to be kept back so that limited beings can hold it. Otherwise, they will burn in the light. Their brain is not going to be big enough in order to hold it. So both are a revelation of God, both Chesed and Gvura. We're going to see, by the way, all the attributes work the same way. Chesed and Gvura, Netzach and Hod. Yeah, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Yeah, they all work the same ways. We're going to call them two names. We're going to call them, I don't know, it's names that I'm giving. It's in my brain, it works well, this one. I'm not sure how to say it in regular English, but I would call one hysterical and one according to the brain, normal. Normal is the wrong word, but not hysterical, in order, let's call it. Yeah? So the hysterical one will be Chesed. It will just give. And the one who's not hysterical, who's, comes according to a measurement, according to what you need, that's going to be Gvura. The same thing is going to be in Netzach and Hod. Netzach is going to be hysterical. Hod is the opposite of Netzach. It's going to be in certain measurement according to the brain. It's exactly to the creature. Yeah? So all the time, that's why they call them kfulot. We call them the pairs. They're always, in all those pairs, there's a hysterical pair and a non-hysterical pair. An hysterical pair and a non-hysterical pair.
What would be a Hebrew word for hysterical? Because I don't get...
Infinite. I call it an infinite power, overflowing, giving everything. Too much, going crazy, balagan, chaos, call it whatever you want. Overwhelming. Yeah, everything. When you give everything, yeah. Yeah. Infinite, this whole thing, yeah.
The command Shemesh, he give you, it doesn't matter you were good to or not good, no?
Yeah, exactly. That's the analogy. The sun is, for example, it doesn't matter if you deserve it or don't deserve it. It shines to everybody. It gives life to everybody. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. None of you have asked a question that people probably should have asked. We learned that there are three mothers: Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat, the third one. So the question is, where's the Dat and what do we need it? So just to, in many Kabbalistic books, Dat doesn't appear. You don't find that. That is not a midah. It's not an attribute. Instead of that, they have keter. You will find that instead of that, they have a sphere called keter. So if you find some Kabbalistic books and you don't find that, you'll see that instead of that, they will have the word keter over there, crown, instead of that. And after we explain what that is, we will understand why. Because that is not exactly an attribute. That is putting two attributes together. So that is going to be a level. It's a very interesting level. It's a level between intellect and emotions. There's an intermediary level, which is not intellect, it is not emotions, it's called that. And why do we need it? We will see soon. So we are like 7-8 lines from the bottom where you have the full stop. So let's see what the dat is. Ve'adat hu, and dat, what is dat? Hu milashon ha'adam yada et chava. It's exactly like in the English. It says that Adam biblically knew Chava. So what does it mean that Adam knew Chava? He could point her in a line out. Yeah, what does it mean? Yeah, she was the only one. It's not that hard, you know. So the word new in the Torah, well, means became one, had a relationship with. They had intimate relations. Adam niyu Chava. They became one. They had intimate relationships. We see soon. מלשון והאדם ידע את חווה, והוא לשון התקשרות והתחברות. It means that they became one. They became united. How do you become united with God? Or united with an idea that you had about God? So let's see. שמקשר דעתו, that a person sticks his mind בקשר אמיץ וחזק מאוד, with a bond which is very, 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 very strong. ויתקע מחשבתו, and he's going to stick his thinking בחוזק, with strength. בגדולת אין סוף ברוך הוא, in the greatness of God. ואינו מסיח דעתו, and he shouldn't move his mind, not even for 1 second. In other words, in our words, he should become obsessed. כי אף מי, and then he's going to tell him, I can give you a person who's the smartest man on earth. Einstein, 100 times Einstein. כי אף מי שהוא חכם, that a person has great chokhmah, ונבון, and the person has great bina. He understands things he has the ideas that are unbelievable coming to his mind. And then he's able to explain it to himself and explain it to other people enormously. You know what I remember? I don't remember who it was, but in England, there used to be somebody who used to teach ethics. Very big guy. In England, in Oxford, in one of those, fancy universities. And they found him doing some things that wasn't very ethical, So they came up to him and they wanted to throw him away from Oxford. So he says, you can't do that. So they asked him, so they asked him why. So he says, I know everything about ethics. Yeah, that doesn't mean I need to behave that way. So they told him, sure you do. So he told them, before I was an ethics professor, I was a professor of geometry, and I'm not a triangle. In other words, the fact that you have chokhmah and bina doesn't mean that you're going to have emotions towards it. To grow up an ethical value that you're going to love doing the right thing and hate doing the wrong thing. There's not necessarily. A person can understand, can give you the best speech in the world about ethics. He can know everything about ethics. What he does to the neshama, what he does to the soul, what he does to the community, what he does to the person, what he does everything. He knows it inside out. He knows all the structure. And at night, he can be a thief. He can be a murderer. What's the connection? One is knowledge, and the other the knowledge is not me. It's internal to me. It's external to me. What is that? That is the one thing that makes you one with the knowledge. This is the process of that. And the way to make you one with the knowledge is to obsess over it until it becomes your life. It's like a musician. A musician is obsessed with music. What does it mean, obsessed with music? He walks in the streets, and for you are sounds. He doesn't hear sounds. He hears music. He hears notes. He's so obsessed in that world that he is a musician. His understanding of music, and he became one. In order to have an emotion out of your chokhmah and bina, it's not enough to have emotions. It's not going to grow on its own. In order to make it grow, a person needs to become united to it. And how? He needs to obsess. If he doesn't obsess over the information, if he doesn't make it his life, the emotions are going to be emotions. And by the way, now you're going to understand, the more you understand, the deeper you go, the easier it is to obsess. The less you understand, when you're not good at something, it's hard to obsess over something. When you're starting to obsess over something, when you're starting to see, oh, I understand this, and you're starting to become good at something, then the obsession is easy. If you don't see fruits, I'm learning, okay, I understand a little bit here, it's hard to obsess. But a person who has a great intellect and a great bina, he has to expand it, and he doesn't obsess over it, he will not grow into the emotions. So, notice that is not a sphere. It doesn't do anything on its own. All it does is it makes a connection between Chokhmah and Bina. Let's say that in modern language, just one more second. Chokhmah is understanding the concept, for 1 second. Bina is understanding the concept this way and that way and all the way thing. I understand it now good. That doesn't mean that you're going to have any emotion. You don't love the thing. You don't feel it. It has nothing to do with you. It's information. You want to have love and fear, you have to start obsessing over it until it becomes you. And what does it mean it becomes me? But that is not an emotion. It's not an emotion. What is it? I think the closest thing to understand it is an opinion. That's what that is. In other words, I understand the house of Shammai. I understand the house of Hillel. In other words, I understand these two things. Shammai, this is his reasoning. I understand everything he says. Hillel, this is his reasoning. I understand everything he says. I can hold both things in my mind. I can explain to you Shammai very, very well. I can explain to you the logic of Hillel very, very well. That is, I'm going to ask you, but what's your opinion? My opinion is that, what do you mean my opinion? I just explained to you Shammai and Hillel. No, but what is you see, it makes it personal. Chokhmah and Bina are removed from you. You're talking about things which are external. Opinion is mine. It's my opinion, but usually intellect is nothing to do with me. It's only 2 + 2 = 4, whether I agree with it, whether I don't agree with it. Whether it's my opinion or not my opinion, right? So logic should be, whether in my opinion, logic, whatever is logical. But all of a sudden you have 2 logics, and your opinion tells you, I like this logic better than that logic. And you're going to ask why. So I don't know why, that's my opinion. I can explain both logics, but this one I like better. This is what that is. That is make it personal. Taking the information that you had before, and you make it personal to you. After you be able to make it personal, now you're going to be able, according to your personality, now is going to develop your chesed and gvura towards your opinion, your love and fear towards the matter.
I think that means you answered my question, that actually is the unification with yourself.
Very good.
And then you get...
But it's not an emotion yet. It's an intellectual unification with yourself.
But we said that Chokhmah is the intellect, which creates the emotion, which is...
It's not going to create the emotion unless the mother and father are going to come together.
So you don't create that.
That you do. That is an action.
So it doesn't come from Chokhmah and Bina.
Without Chokhmah and Bina, there's nothing to unite with.
So Chokhmah Bina create that.
No, it doesn't create it. You obsess over your Chokhmah and Bina, that's that.
Well, the first time that is mentioned is not Adam and Chava, is Etz HaChaim ve'Etz HaDat. And Etz HaDat is to know the difference between right and wrong. And it's very personal. I can say one way, and the biggest thing is artificial intelligence, the car wouldn't know whom to kill, the old lady or the baby, because, you know, you don't, because the old guy could be an important rabbi that I know,
Yeah.
a little child who don't know what comes out of it, but they'll make a decision.
Yeah.
The car
Yeah.
would meet somebody because
Let's discuss this let's discuss this later on. Yes.
I just wanted to see that my understanding always was Chochma Bina Dat. Chochma is the Barak HaMavrik that come down, that you see the idea, you see the light in the room.
Correct.
Then you start the Bina, you reconstruct what you saw.
Very good.
And the Dat is once it's become yours. Then when they wake you up in 4 o'clock in the morning, it's yours. You know exactly what's
Very good. How the question is, how does it become yours?
By
Obsessing over it.
obsessing over it, then it becomes yours. No.
Here's the next part. He says, Im lo yekasher da'ato, if a person is not going to obsess his mind, ve'itka b'chshavato, and is going to have his brain bechozek ube'atmada, in strength and in a continuous manner, lo yolid benafsho ir'a ve'ahava amitit. He will never create in his soul true love and awe of God. You know what he's going to have? He's going to have feelings. What are these feelings? Dimyonot shav. He's fooling himself. He's living we call it, he lives in La La Land. He just created something. They're not true things. Ve'al ken, and therefore, hadat, the dat, what is it? Hu kiyum amidot. Without that, you will not have emotions. The dat, even though it's not a sphera, it's just obsessing over chokhmah and bina, yeah, it is the reason for the creation of the emotions, vechayutan, and their life. And that has both. That is the bridge between the intellect and the emotion. Vehu kolel chesed vegvura, and in that he is going to give life to both chesed and gvura, pirush, ahava v'anafea v'ira v'anafea, which means love and all its tributaries, and awe and all its tributaries. Let's just take this as an example from modern day life. See, all this is not just talking. You can take it into your own life. Let's say you go on a date with your wife. You go on a date with your wife. Valentine's Day is this week. Tu Bishvat. Yeah. So Valentine's Day is this week. Good. So. Tonight, right now. That's right. Tu Bishvat is tonight. That's right. So you go on a date with your wife, and you put your phone down on the table. Right? You just put your phone down on the table. You don't look at it. But the phone is down, and you go to the date is not a date. It's not a romantic date. And I can tell you why. Because you're not obsessing over her. If the phone is left at home, if you didn't leave the phone, if you're carrying the phone, it's still a question whether it's a date. It's still a question whether it's a date, even if you're just carrying the phone. Obsessing over the relationship means that nothing else exists. No one can call. There's nothing. It's me and you. That's what it means. That's an obsession over someone. Obsession means there's not even the possibility of me going into the back pocket to pick up something else. So if you wonder, if we wonder, how come we don't have a relationship with God? How come we don't love and have love and awe of God? Even if we do know something, even if we learn something, and we're not obsessed over it, what are you surprised? We don't love and awe. We don't have that. In order to really have love and awe of God, you need to obsess over Him. It's not going to come like this, just with a relationship. You want to go on a date with your wife, yeah? You leave the phone at home. If your phone is with you...
I didn't see a guy that does this.
There you go. Yeah.
I haven't seen one like that.
It's okay. Over here we're talking about obsession with God. We're talking about godly soul. It works the same way. It works the same way. Just one more. I'm going to remind everybody of the sins of your youth. It's called. Yeah? את חטאיי אני מזכיר היום. Yeah? Do you remember your first love? You were 14 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old, somewhere around there. Everybody had this experience, the first love. Yeah? Yeah, or the puppy love, whatever it's called. You remember what you thought? How much of the day did you think about her?
All day. All day long.
In other words, you were in math class. What did you think about?
Obsessed.
In math class, what did you think about? Her. When you were doing your dishes and when you're doing your chores, what did you think about? Her. When you drive, when you're talking to your friends, what were you thinking about? Her. This is, yeah. This is what it means to obsess over God. It's not that you don't live your life. It's okay to do everything. A person can have a marriage, can have wife, can have children, can have everything. But you know where his mind is all the time? With his true love. What is true love? God. This is the way Moshe lived. You want to ask how Moshe lived? Moshe constantly was obsessed with God. It was an obsession. It was one big obsession. It's not like he didn't talk to people. He talked to people like you were in math class. You passed the test, but you didn't really listen. You understand what I'm saying? This is what it means. And that's how you create love and awe. Yeah? By the way, this is how you create love and awe in the godly soul. We're going to see the animal soul is going to be a little bit different. So let's talk it. See, the animals, just to something to think about. I don't need to explain to you to love chocolate. It comes naturally. God, there's no natural love to God. Unless you obsess over it, you do something with it, it's not going to come. Chocolate, women, wine, that comes naturally. You don't have to obsess. Whether you like it or not, it will come. This has to be obsessed. That's up to here.